Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Trade Talk. I've got my great mate Daz back. He's been on hiatus. He's actually had a baby. Congratulations, Daz. It's good to have you back. I know you've been keeping a close eye on the footy with the baby on the couch over the weekends.
Yeah, it's been a good excuse to just sort of sit down and laze about. I do have Tom Haylock's face pressed against the glass, though. He's trying to get back in the room, thinking, what's happened? Why have I been benched? But he'll be putting pressure on, I think, to replace one of us if we were to slip up in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, lots of pressure on Daz. So we better get this weekend review right. We're going to kick off by having a look at last weekend's footy. Does anything catch your eye over the weekend?
Yeah, I think Brisbane humming along. Obviously, a lot of talk out of that game was Carlton with the reaction to their loss and some of the commentary after it. But Brisbane 5 weeks ago lost to the Bulldogs on a Thursday night and looked pretty ordinary. But they've won 5 in a row since then and built some really good form. They beat Collingwood. They've obviously now won 3 away matches as well, which was a bit of a test for them. Got Essendon again this week. So I think the jury will be out on them until the finals start. But they're into fourth favourite for the flag now at about 620-ish. And they're playing as well as anyone in the comp at the moment.
You're our stats man at Betfair. I don't want to catch you off guard, but it wouldn't surprise me if you knew this information. I feel like Brisbane are going absolutely swimmingly at Etihad right now, but would I be right in saying that they're pretty average at the MCG?
Yeah, so they've won 6 of their last 7 at Marvel, and last year when they beat Melbourne in the semi-final, I think it was. That was their first win at the MCG in 11 years, I think it was, possibly more. It might have been 2009, actually, their last win there before that. So that's the test on them. They handle the slick track at Marvel really well, but they've got to go to the MCG. Obviously, if you look at the best teams in the competition as probably being Collingwood, Melbourne, and maybe Geelong, Brisbane will have to go through probably at least 2 of those to win a flag in Melbourne. So, that's the test for them.
Without any notice whatsoever, that's why you're the best stat man at Betfair, probably the entire world, let's be honest. Something that I want to talk about, a couple of the moves on the exchange over the weekend. Gold Coast almost scraped through with a win against the D's. Surprisingly, the D's actually didn't get higher than $1.62 throughout the game, which surprises me because I thought Gold Coast looked like they were winners at different parts of the game. What did you think about that?
Yeah, it was level at three-quarter time, and obviously the Gold Coast had a set shot in the last minute to draw the game, which they probably should have kicked 35 metres out directly in front. They were really impressive, the Suns. That was possibly their best performance of the year. I know they beat Geelong, but the Cats weren't going all that well at the time. And yeah, Melbourne are a funny one. I think we all acknowledge that they're a very good side and clearly in the mix for the flag, and they're 6-2. They've done nothing wrong this year, but they do have those little patchy moments within matches. So, they've probably still got some improvement to come, which is scary, I think, in a way for them.
I really love the game of Gold Coast over the weekend, and I wish them all the best. I'm a big Gold Coast believer, and I hope they have some success soon. With the way that they played against the D's, there should be some more wins in the next few weeks. But I want to talk about Essendon. Essendon suffer another close defeat on the weekend. And I just want to bring your attention to something, Daz. So this year, Essendon have played St Kilda, who are 3rd on the ladder, Melbourne, who are 2nd on the ladder, Collingwood, who are 1st on the ladder, Geelong, who are 6th, Port, who are 5th, and this weekend they've got Brisbane, who are 4th on the ladder, Daz.
Yeah,
that is not lucky at all.
And the last 2 interstate, so Port Adelaide in Adelaide, then Brisbane in Brisbane, so back-to-back interstate games. And they've been all right. Obviously, they beat Melbourne. They've been
more than all right, Daz. I think they've exceeded expectations.
They should have beaten Collingwood. Obviously, they were 5 goals up and got overrun. St Kilda and Geelong games were very similar in that they conceded, I think, the first 5 or 6 goals in both matches and then played pretty well after that. And they were in front of Port for a long way. Port were pretty inaccurate, and I think we're comfortably the better side. But they've hung in there really well, and they beat Brisbane at the Gabba last year. Admittedly, Brisbane had a lot of players out due to the pandemic. But they'll give themselves a chance, I think, going up there. And one thing about a tough draw is it means that it should get easier. And Essendon have still got North Melbourne and West Coast twice. So if you're a Bombers fan, don't despair. There are a lot of winnable games to come, which is obviously the bite-off of having such a tough start.
Well, let's have a look at the exchange odds at some point in the show because there potentially could be a trading opportunity there. They've played all these teams. They're obviously a higher price on the exchange. If they win a couple of those games, they're definitely going to firm for that top 8 position. I want to talk about Port Adelaide. They drifted from $1.69 pre-play to $2.80 in play and managed to run over the Dons again, but that just goes to show the opportunities on the exchange there. If you don't like a price, you can wait and potentially back a team in play. Same with Collingwood. Collingwood opened at $1.56, a firm favourite against the Sydney Swans, and they drifted in play to $2.08 against Sydney. Obviously ended up getting the win, but there's potentially some good betting strategies around Collingwood. They obviously love playing good footy late in games. So
yeah, and they would have got, I mean, opening at $1.56, they led 23-1, I think, at one stage. So they would have been $1.10 potentially in play there. And then obviously Sydney kicked 5 in a row and led at half time and flipped that. And you kind of expect that Sydney are going to do that at times this year, that they're not as bad as perhaps their ladder position suggests. But yeah, there's plenty of those opportunities. And you mentioned Port. I like the fact that they're still about $1.50 to make the 8. And they've won 5 in a row. They've got North this week, who you think they'll make it 6 in a row, probably move into the top 4 as a result of that. Yeah, they're representing some pretty good value, I think, there.
Yeah, that's a good shout on Port, especially if they're playing North Melbourne this week. Well, you've just touched on their odds. Do you want to take a look at you wanted to take a look at the flag market? You've obviously liked something about the Swans. What's happening with the Blues, the Saints? It's a curious time with those clubs.
It's interesting. Whilst I don't think necessarily any of the three will win the flag, on the balance of that hierarchy, Sydney, Carlton, St Kilda, you would say on the year that it's gone St Kilda, Carlton, Sydney, probably in that order. But Sydney continuing to drift, but Sydney is shorter than both Carlton and St Kilda, and Carlton and St Kilda are the same odds at the moment. So St Kilda drifted in what was a really ugly game against North Melbourne. Carlton's odds sort of plummeted from 15, 16s down into the mid-20s. But yeah, it's interesting. There's still a bit of faith in Sydney that Sydney is shorter for the flag than St Kilda and Port Adelaide and Essendon and Carlton. So you'd argue that all 4 of those sides have got better claims right now, but maybe that's just the faith that the market has in the Swans.
Yeah, interesting. And we're definitely going to touch on the ladder predictor in a moment, but it does segue into our prediction segments. And first, we'll kick off with the Brownlow predictor. Geez, there's a lot happening here. And after another tagged out performance, Nick Daicos has slightly drifted from 355 out to 365. But is there anything on the Brownlow predictor that you wanted to take a look at, Daz?
Yeah, I still think he's a chance to get, I mean, he's had, 26 and 27 in those games. Collingwood have won both of them. I know Myercheck kicked 5 on the weekend and was the star, but I still think he's a chance, the way these things work, to attract a vote. We know players sometimes get votes when they're a little bit below their best, and it can be a bit sort of hit and miss, but certainly Marcus Bontempelli, who I think you've identified. There's been a lot of talk in the last couple of weeks. He had his 200th game, and a lot of people saying that he deserves to win a Brownlow. He's been the best player in the comp for a while, certainly one of the best midfielders. I know it doesn't work like that. You don't just win one because you deserve one, but yeah, he was BOG again. And when you look at players BOG when their rivals have had quiet weeks, so if Daicos doesn't get a vote in the last 2 and Bontempelli polls in both of them, then that does really swing that a little bit. But I want to keep an eye on, it's a risky strategy because forwards don't get votes, but Jeremy Cameron's not just kicking goals, he's getting 20 to 25 possessions a game.
It's killing me, Daz.
Yeah, so my theory,
in a good way.
That's right. So my theory on that is that if ever you're going to see a forward get votes, it's forwards that are pushing up and getting the ball. So yeah, he'd be one to keep an eye on as well.
There is no better player in the competition than Jeremy Cameron at the moment.
Absolutely.
If you're kicking 2 goals 3 and having 17, 18 touches, 10 marks around the ground, that is a 3-vote performance.
Are we a chance to get 100 goals kicked? So Charlie Curnow and Jeremy Cameron are on track to kick mid-90s in the home and away season. So Geelong will make the finals. Carlton might make the finals. So I know we've seen players start like this before and then don't kick it on. I just wonder whether we'll get a ton. It looks more possible than normal.
Well, my fingers crossed are for that, because I missed the days of the 100 goals. It hasn't happened in a while since Buddy was the last one in 2009.
Yes, that's 2008.
2008,
yep.
that one. Well, the one that I want to talk about is Marcus Bontempelli. There has been a massive go for him. He was $7.80 before the last round into $4.10. So he went from being a 14% chance of winning the Brownlow out to a 24% chance, which is a massive move, Daz.
Yeah, that is a huge move. And we know that he attracts votes. If you look at the Bulldogs midfield, Josh Dunkley's moved on this year. Treloar's now injured for a couple of weeks. You've got Bailey Smith who goes through their liver, etc. But Bontempelli is certainly the marquee player amongst that. And just a superstar, and he's a guy that you'd love to see. We saw it with Cripps last year, that it feels right for them to have a Brownlow next to their name, and it feels right that he would finish his career with one.
Yeah, I think so. And Marcus Bontempelli had some injury issues last year, as did Patrick Cripps in 2021. It was, before going on to win the Brownlow in 2022. And we're seeing the similar thing happen with Marcus Bontempelli. But on Betfair's Brownlow predictor, we've got Nick Daicos, still the outright leader on 14 votes there, $3.55. Christian Petrarca has now gone into second with 11.5 votes, and still $15 on the exchange, does. So there's a little bit of value there for punters. His teammate Clayton Oliver still has polled in every game except the last round performance in round 8, but he's 11 votes and $6.60 on the exchange. I think he's still value there. Marcus Bontempelli is actually also equal third on 11 votes, and he's short into $4.60.
And that's where it's fascinating. So the predictor for the Gold Coast game has Noah Anderson, who was brilliant, getting 3 votes, and Petrarca getting 2. I think that's right. I think Anderson was BOG, but Melbourne winning the game and Petrarca kicking goals in the last quarter. You just wonder whether he bumps another vote there and pushes even closer.
Definitely does. Well, let's head over to the ladder predictor, and the top 8 market has seen a huge drift on Carlton. They were $1.74 before the start of the round. They are out to $2.16 for the top 8, and that is a massive drift.
Yeah, that's huge. It's obviously gone from being the favourite outcome to the least favourite outcome, which is interesting because they're in the 8 as it stands at the moment, so that they're the incumbent on the position. So, and Sydney clearly at 3 and 5. They've got a big game with Fremantle this week, who are also 3 and 5. So that would put one of last year's finalists at 3 and 6. So, as I say, the premiership market hasn't caught up to that yet. So the top 8 market has Sydney sliding, but they're still probably a little bit unders, you might say, on the flag market, given their form.
Well, I was going to bring up Sydney, and they were $1.91, and they lost to the top of the table Pies, and now they're out to $2.30. So they're an even bigger price than Carlton. What do you think about Sydney, Daz?
Yeah, I think there was a few years back, 2017 or 18, where they lost their first, I'm going to say 6, and then ended up 14 and 8 and made the finals comfortably. There was all that talk around teams recovering from getting flogged in grand finals, and maybe they're feeling the pinch of that, but it just doesn't look like it at the moment. They've got a fair bit of young talent, but they've got a lot of injuries, and it just feels like it might be one of those years for them where they, it just gets away from them a little bit. So yeah, I wouldn't be backing them in either of those at present.
Well, we'll get the ladder predictor up now, and Melbourne's still firmly on top in the rated price for premiership odds, and their back price is still $5.40. It's been solid on $5, around that $5.40 mark for a few weeks now, but the big mover in the rated prices section is Geelong. They are now $4.57, and they are now second favourite, clearly in the rated prices. Geelong only a matter of weeks ago were $10 plus in that premiership market. So that's a massive firm as well.
And you look at the differences in some of those. Collingwood's obviously the interesting one so Melbourne, Geelong, Collingwood, that's the order of that. Collingwood are almost double the rated price compared to their current odds, and haven't really done all that much wrong this year. And the big discrepancies are Brisbane, obviously about $6, but the rated price at 11s. Sydney 13, rated price 23. St Kilda 18 and 23. And Port Adelaide, the other one, their rated price is at 25 and 15s as it stands at the moment. So there's a bit of a discrepancy there, but probably Collingwood being clear third rank behind Melbourne and Geelong is a little bit surprising.
Yeah, well, the clear advice for me off this is to lay Brisbane for the premiership if they're rated at 11.35 and are currently 6.20. That's really short for the premiership. Off the advice of the ladder predictor here, I think I'd be laying Brisbane for the premiership. Is there anything that you would potentially do at this point of the season, Daz?
I'd probably back Collingwood actually on that. I think they've looked the most complete. I mean, Geelong have been amazing in the last 5 weeks. Spoke about Melbourne being a little bit patchy. Collingwood are winning from everywhere. Obviously, there's a lot of self-belief in their side, and I like the fact that they're, from where they stand at the moment, I think that they've been the most convincing team to me in the competition.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, but the rated price for Collingwood they've never liked it.
No, that's right. And I understand that. It's a difficult one because Collingwood being a popular club with their huge supporter base and things like that, sometimes you can be unders a little bit, but having Collingwood and Melbourne as close as they are, I still don't mind that on Collingwood. I mean, the rated price I would disagree with. I would think that they're closer to reality with that, to be honest.
Yeah, well, there's a few extenuating circumstances that come into it. I think Collingwood have the biggest home advantage of any team in the AFL because of their supporter base. And as much as you hate them, if you're a Collingwood player, you'd absolutely love them because, that's exactly the supporter base I would want if I was playing AFL on the G and I was down by 5 goals in the fourth quarter, Daz.
Which has happened.
They seem to do it every single time. But let's head over to buy, hold and sell. I've been looking forward to getting stuck back into this segment with you, Daz, and I'm going to let you kick it off. Who are you buying this week?
So Geelong were about $1.62 last week to finish top 4, and they still are. Obviously, they had a good win over Adelaide, who are in form. You look at their run, they got Richmond this week. It's a big rivalry match, but they're clearly going better than the Tigers. And I know they're going to face some tricky matches over the course of the next month or so, but they've got so many Kardinia Park games to come, which they won't lose any of those or one at most. It's hard to see how they don't finish top 4, to be honest.
That's a great call, Daz. I think those Kardinia Park games are so crucial when looking at their future run. But I'm buying Sydney this week, and I love their performance against the top of the table Pies. I think John Longmire is an absolutely outstanding coach, and he's shown that across his whole career. They've got some players back. They've got 3 winnable games in the next 3 weeks. Currently $2.30 to make the top 8. That's definitely a market I'm keen to bet into. $2.30 for last year's a premiership runner-up. Seems too long for me. Daz, who are you holding on this week?
I was going to say the Saints, due to their big game against Adelaide, obviously their form's been patchy in the last 2 weeks, and this is a big test for them. And if they win it, I think it further underlines their credentials. If they lose it, they come back to the pack a little bit. But Carlton and the Bulldogs, I'll probably go with those two sides because we're going to learn a stack about them. The Bulldogs' form has improved, but this is another good challenge for them at Marvel against a side that's pretty hungry. And Carlton, for all of the talk around them and all of the doom and gloom, they've stayed in the 8 all year. They're 4-3-1. They're still ahead of the ledger, so they don't need to panic. Guys like Curnow and Mackay have a good record against the Dogs, so I want to hold on both of those sides because I think we're going to learn a heck of a lot about where they are both at this point.
I'm not too different, Daz. I'm holding on the Blues as well, and let's add the Dogs in there. I think you've convinced me. I'm just not sure what the Blues are going to dish up this week. What I really want to see from them, as a supporter, but also as someone that wants to back into that market and hopefully predict a couple of wins in the future, is boys, have fun. Have fun. Let the pressure go off your shoulders a little bit. I saw Paddy Cripps trying to rally the troops at 3/4 times, but they just look so upset, so tight. So it's not a look that you want to see. I remember a few years ago, Richmond were the best team in the comp, and at halftime they had Jack Higgins telling them jokes. I don't mind that. I think at the end of the day, AFL is fun, and you're very lucky to be playing the game. We're very lucky to be watching you play the game. So take it easy, have a little bit of fun, and hopefully a little bit of that inhibition and that want to just play the game of footy comes back to the Blues.
And it feels like, and I agree that it feels like they're trying to take the pressure off themselves a little bit by like Adam Chera coming out this week saying, it's not a failure if we miss the 8 and all of that sort of stuff. I get what they're trying to do there, but to me, you go the other way. You embrace the opportunity and go, how cool would it be to play finals? That's what we're trying to do.
Absolutely.
I don't think you should lower that expectation, but you can turn the expectation into a positive. It's not like, the sky will fall in if we lose. It's like, let's hunt this, and how good's this going to be if we can, first time playing finals since 2013. If we get there, it'll be fantastic.
Let's talk about it next week, Daz, and I want you to have a close look at whether any of the Carlton players smile across their 4 quarters against the Western Bulldogs. Who are you selling this week, Daz?
It's probably not a betting one, but the match review officers and the tribunal in general, I think it's been a very inconsistent year, as it always is, and particularly the Van Rooyen suspension in the Melbourne Gold Coast game. I think that's a football action where a player's backing back. I think he had an idea where the ball was, that he was pinged for not having his eyes on the ball, but you could tell he had a look over the shoulder. You could see where the ball was going to go. He's missed it by a centimetre, made contact with the player's head in a spoil. That's a free kick every day of the week, but that's all it is, I would think. And I'm glad Melbourne have challenged it. You throw that into the banner of how inconsistent the sling tackle interpretation has been all year. And it really is. They always used to say it's a lottery. It is genuinely a lottery. You've got no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, I like that one, Daz. It's getting pretty confusing. I just hope that it's okay for a free kick to be enough.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to suspend someone And I know Tom and I, while you were away, were talking about the Brownlow market is going to get affected by all these suspensions. Yep. I mean, imagine if that was a Marcus Bontempelli, who I'm about to talk about now, that goes in and misses a week, 2 weeks, and more importantly, isn't allowed to win a Brownlow medal off the back of a suspension like that. So, yeah, we haven't seen really tricky ones come out, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot more.
Look at last year, the Cripps talk with the collision, and that's still getting spoken about now with that suspension getting overturned. So.
That's right. This week, Daz, I'm selling Marcus Bontempelli, and before people jump down my throat, he's in absolutely fantastic form, but I'm ready to lock in a profit on Marcus Bontempelli. I backed him at the start of the season at $19. He's currently $4.20 on the exchange. I'm ready to lay off Bont. He's a very short price considering Petrarca is absolutely firing at the moment. Oliver is flying. Cameron is firing. And we know Daicos is the firm favourite there. So it's very firm at the top of the market. I'm not sure how much shorter Marcus Bontempelli is going to be. Yes, he could win the medal, but I'd like to guarantee some sort of profit. I've backed high, I've laid low, and that's the beauty of the Betfair Exchange.
Yep, I think that's spot on. I won't steal your thunder because of what you've got next, but I wanted to have a chat about the notion of stealing votes a little bit later on in relation to that, and whether that's a myth or something that actually does happen.
Well, I mean, we're going straight into our trading strategies here, and I'll find out what you want to potentially bet into on the exchange this week.
Yeah, so I think this week there's a lot of matches that are not lopsided, but you look at things like Collingwood GWS, you look at Port Adelaide North and matches like that, which you would anticipate to be relatively one way, but I don't mind the line on Port at about 30 points against the Kangaroos. Admittedly, it's unfamiliar territory for Port Adelaide. I'm pretty sure on the spot that game's in Hobart. So as for whether they can get on a run down there, but I think that's a pretty generous line for mine on Port Adelaide, and I think that's a good way to probably play this week and turn what would have been, say, $1.10 into $1.90.
Yeah, I like it, Daz. Well, as well as the Bontempelli lay there, I'm also going to have a couple of dollars on Christian Petrarca, currently second in predicted voting for the Brownlow medal. He's just a really nice price on the exchange. If you're getting 15s, 16s, I think his price is too big considering he's predicted to be coming second in the Brownlow. So I also want to keep an eye on him post-buy because he is a post-buy specialist. He absolutely loves the time off, and I think he'll shorten again post-buy. So I'm going to play that strategy the same as Marcus Bontempelli. Hopefully back him at a high price, and when he gets a couple more 3-vote games, we can lay off again a little bit later.
Pretty hungry, given he obviously finished last year with the broken leg, and obviously would be keen to start this year well, given the way that it finished for he and his team. And on the stealing votes thing, obviously to have two players from the same team pretty high up in the market and high up in the leaderboard. You got Petrarca and Oliver. One's about 6s, one's about 15s at this stage. Generally, good players in good teams win Brownlows, and there's usually more than one good player in a team. So I've never been one necessarily to say, he won't win a Brownlow because his teammate will steal votes from him. Melbourne will win 17 games probably this year. There's a lot of votes to go around. They could both finish top 5 and one of them could win it. So, yeah, I'm never one who totally subscribes to but what about his teammates pinching votes? He can win it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Daz. Well, we're going to actually go with a new segment this week, and it's called Back or Lay. And Daz is going to ask me a question. I'm going to ask Daz a question. It's going to be a back or lay question, and we're going to provide our thoughts. Daz, I'm going to ask you this question. Back or lay, booing at the footy?
It's a lay, but in saying that, I think it's inevitable. Like, I'll lay it, but it's not going to stop. I mean, I think anybody who's watched a game in Perth when the Eagles play at home, there's booing and then there's booing. There's the theatrical booing of a player playing against his old side, or someone's knocked out one of your players, or there's been a crude hit, that type of thing. The booing for no apparent reason or because someone is good, that irks me a little bit. So obviously Buddy getting booed simply because he's a superstar, I would imagine. I mean, Papley was getting booed because he was being antagonistic. Mason Wood got booed by North fans because he was playing against his old side. It's hard to write rules on when it's right and wrong, but I agree with the sentiment that you're dealing with one of the champions of the game who hasn't played against your team at the MCG for 10 years. I'm not sure about booing them, but yeah, I mean, it's a sheep mentality where 2, 3, 4 people boo and they're like, okay, we're booing this guy now. It happened with St Kilda fans the week before with Jason Horne-Francis. It's relatively harmless, but it's very, very stupid. So that's a lay for mine.
Yeah, I like that one, Daz. And I just want to add to that. I mean, it might follow with a question, but the NBA's marketing campaign is revolved around heroes and villains in the NBA. You've got your villains who are your gritty players, you know, and funnily enough, Matthew Dellavedova back in the day was a villain. And we didn't think that from here because we absolutely love his hustle at the ball. But you look at Dylan Brooks, Kevin Durant at times are those villains. LeBron James, sometimes they list it villains. And the NBA really embraced that. The AFL don't want to embrace the villain at all, which is interesting.
And it's funny. On one hand, they will, but on one hand, they won't. Like they've often promoted people like Toby Green and Hayden Ballantyne and guys like that that get under their skin. But then they look at things like that. But one thing about tribalism of football fans is that they're always going to be hypocritical, and that's just the way it is. Like, I mean, last year Sydney fans booed Jack Ginnivan, a 19-year-old, when he got injured. Collingwood fans are up in arms, then Collingwood fans boo Buddy, and Sydney fans are up in arms. It happens all the time, and supporters will irk up when it happens to them, but actively do it to someone else. So it's just the way it is.
Well, here's a question, before you ask me your question, here's a question to social media. I want you guys to tell us or let us know, who do you think are the biggest villains in the AFL, right? But they love being the villain. And I reckon Toby Green is one of them, because I reckon if people are booing him, he's starting to heat up a little bit.
Oh, 100%. And you looked at all of those players. I mean, Papley's probably another one who doesn't mind being a villain. A lot of it is those small forwards, like the cheeky sort of small forwards. There's been heaps of them over the journey. I mean, Stephen Baker wasn't a small forward, but he was one who, you know, get under the opposition's skin. Certainly Ballantyne, and taggers are the other ones like Ryan Crowley and people like that that get that. But speaking of that particular game and crowd reaction, what did you make of the treatment of Nick Daicos? Not so much him getting tagged, but obviously the off the ball attention and what it's done to his game.
Back it, Daz. big back. Because it worked. Up until round 6, Nick Daicos averaged 36 touches, and in the last 2 rounds, he only averaged 26 touches. That is massive drop-off in your last 2 rounds. Not only that, he had 5 clangers against Sydney and 4 clangers against Adelaide. He averaged 2.5 clangers in his first 6 rounds and almost 5 in rounds 7 and 8. His dream team averages have gone down at least 30 points. Tagging works. And not only are you tagging a player that is absolutely fantastic and will tear you to shreds if he's given the opportunity, but you're tagging a 19-year-old that most players in the AFL have a physical edge on. So if you have that physical edge, we're playing in a big man's game. AFL is obviously the greatest Australian football league in the whole world. There's no higher. Your team needs to do every single little thing it needs to do to win. And if that means roughing up a 19-year-old, I completely back it. If they go too far, the players are going to get suspended or they're going to get fined, and then that's where the line is.
Yeah, and I agree. We have umpires. They're going to, if you cross the line, they're there to pay free kicks. They're there to report, and it's going to help Nick potentially in the long run anyway. He was going to get tagged eventually. It's come earlier than you would expect because he's exploded as a player in his first 2 years. But he was always going to get that attention. He was always going to have to try to work through it. His teammates are flying the flag, which is exactly what you would expect them to do. Teams are going to always try to get under the skin of the opposition's best players. And if they cross the line, there are people employed to obviously take care of that. So, and again, it probably comes down to that tribalism where fans are always going to go into bat for their own player. But need I remind Pies fans last year with Ed Langdon when he, I think he said they were a one-trick pony and they proceeded to belt the suitcase out of him all day. That's just footy.
Absolutely correct. And Nick Daicos, you're obviously listening. You're a big fan of the show. I implore you to watch The Last Dance or The Bad Boys from Boston. Is it the ESPN 30 for 30 series? Jordan rules, that's all I'll say.
And if he's getting 27 whilst being tagged as a 19-year-old, he's going okay.
That is absolutely correct. We actually love Nick Daicos here on the show, and he always, there's a lot of commentary about him each week, obviously in the Brownlow markets. But Daz, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you back. That was an absolutely fantastic show. That's all we got time for on this week's edition of Trade Talk. Make sure you head to the Betfair Hub for all our trading strategies and head to social media for all the latest commentary.
Chances are you're about to lose. For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.